Support for the Brewlosophy podcast comes from the following. Love to Brew is a national leader in homebrewing supplies, offering exclusive products such as East Coast yeast, TV taps, and Brewlosophy recipe kits, all with free shipping on orders over $75. When you need brewing ingredients or equipment, check out Love to Brew at love2brew.com. The best beer requires the best hops, which Yakima Valley Hops provides fresh from the source to brewers around the world. Find everything from classics to modern favorites, as well as cool experimental varieties and a vast array of ingredients and gear at yakimavalleyhops.com. Hey everybody, I'm Marshall Schott, and this is the Brewlosophy podcast. As I'm sure most of you already know, the hop harvest is upon us, which means that we're going to be getting our hands on the 2017 crop of fresh, amazing hops very, very soon. Well, because of the hop harvest, I thought it'd be really cool to have somebody who's in the industry come on the show and tell us about everything that goes into taking a hop from seed all the way to that glass of delicious beer. And so rather than going over an experiment like we usually do, I invited Doug Wilson from Hopsteiner onto the show, who shares just a ton of great information on breeding, growing, and harvesting hops. I was really lucky enough last year to meet Doug Wilson up in Yakima during the hop harvest. I was invited by Hopsteiner, who Doug Wilson is with, and he was kind of my tour guide. We had a great time. He showed me all of the different facilities that Hopsteiner uses for processing their hops and all the cool stuff that goes into it. He's going to go into detail in all of that stuff. I think you guys will all enjoy it. Well, this year for Hop Harvest, I will be going back up to Yakima. It's one of those things that's just so much fun. I don't know if I'll ever miss it again, like HomebrewCon. It's just a neat thing where it's not so much homebrew oriented because hops are so much bigger than homebrewing, but it just has that really cool atmosphere and feel, and everybody goes to the same bar at night and you're hanging out with all these professional brewers and whatnot. A lot of fun. So anyways, Brian Hall, our newest contributor, is going to be joining me down in Yakima between September 22nd and the 25th. And we'll be hanging out with the dudes from Yakima Valley Hops, probably record a couple of podcasts and do some stuff like that. If you're going to be around or if you want to come out, hit me up and let me know. I'd love to meet up. Brewlosophy is also going to be hanging out at the Great American Beer Fest in Denver, Colorado from October 5th through October 7th. Contributors Jake Houlihan and Malcolm Fraser are going to be going around interviewing some of the brewers of the beers they like the most in hopes of getting some information on those beers, maybe even getting full recipes if those brewers are so willing, that we can then pass on to you. If you're going to be at GABF and you want to meet up, grab a couple stickers, something like that, let us know and we'll try to figure something out. Finally, I want to let you all know about Brew Your Own Magazine's upcoming boot camp in Indianapolis, Indiana. It's on November 3rd and 4th, where you're going to learn hands-on from brewing experts including John Palmer, Gordon Strong, Dr. Chris White, Brad Smith, Michael Tonsmeyer, Ashton Lewis, John Blickman, and more. These full-day workshops are limited to only 35 people, and when you register by September 15th, you're going to save $125, plus a portion of that registration comes back to support Brewlosophy. All you have to do is write Brewlosophy in the notes section of the boot camp registration shopping cart when checking out. BYO's been a huge supporter of Brewlosophy. We really do appreciate them setting this up. You can read more at byo.com/boot-camp-overview. All right, if you'd like to throw some support our way, head over to brewlosophy.com/support, where you'll find a list of links to use whenever you shop at places like Amazon, More Beer, Adventures in Homebrewing, Love to Brew, and pretty much any other place you shop for your homebrew stuff online. You won't feel a thing, and we get a small kickback that helps us to keep bringing you these shows. If you want a little something in return for your support, check out our Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month, you'll be granted access to never-before-published Brewlosophy recipes, receive invites to monthly video chats, and you can even work with us to design your very own experiment. It's pretty cool. That's patreon.com/Brewlosophy. Also, we'd like to ask you all to do us a huge favor by subscribing to the podcast and then leaving a review wherever it is you listen to your podcast. Something this simple really does help us out a bunch, and we appreciate you taking the time to do that. So it's summertime here in the Northern Hemisphere, which means where I live in the Central Valley of California, we're looking at temperatures, regularly going above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, which I think is like 40 degrees Celsius, something like that. It's very warm, and a lot of people like to complain about that. But I sort of love it because it means I get to hang out around a pool, listening to good music and drinking pale lagers because they are abundant at this time of year where I live. And one of my favorite ones comes from Sierra Nevada. It's called Summerfest. I believe it's like a Bohemian style Pilsner, very low on the hop character, pretty good malt character. I get kind of like a white bread crust type of thing from it, but really just a simple, easy drinking beer that tastes absolutely delicious. Well, I've been sharing all of the Summerfest that I've been buying over the last couple of months, which is no small amount, with my buddies Jersey and Tim. They've had, a few bottles themselves, and it's never really become a conversation piece. So I thought it would be fun to see what they really think of this beer when they drink it without knowing what it is.
1 minute beer review with Jersey and Tim.
It's got something on the end, like
It's
lingering.
I'm not finding anything.
Wouldn't be my first choice.
I think it's quite delicious. It tastes European-y. Cobblestones.
You peed on my knee?
Cobblestones. Cathedrals. Sitting outside. That's what it tastes like. I like it, dude. What do you think? Come on.
Well, I could drink it, but it's not.
Well, I know you. I could see you drinking it. I'm watching you drink it.
I'm trying to think. It's just like the end where it stays in your mouth. I don't like that.
What?
Shut your face.
No, it's gone. It's already in your stomach. No, I like this. This is good. It's not slapping me in the face. It likes me, dude. I'm friends with this beer. It's good. It agrees. It just wants to be drank. It doesn't, it's not pretentious. Yeah, it's all right. It's very neutral. It's not weird flavored. It's just.
No, it's not weird flavored at all. It's just a lingering.
What do you mean lingering?
Like a little soapy lingering at the end.
There's no soap.
I'm just saying.
Well, it's gone. And I enjoyed it.
Mine too.
Up next, Doug Wilson from Hopsteiner joins me to talk about the upcoming 2017 Hop Harvest. We'll be right back. After a long brew day, the last thing I want to do is waste time chilling work, which is why I use cleverly designed immersion chillers from Jaded Brewing. After some bad experiences with counterflow and plate chillers, I began the search for a more efficient chilling solution and discovered Jaded. That was nearly 4 years ago, and to this day, I continue to rely on the King Cobra and the Hydra to chill my wort in record time without the setup or cleaning hassle of other chillers. If you're looking for a way to optimize your brew day, I can't recommend Jaded chillers enough. Go see what they have to offer at jadedbrewing.com and let them know Brewlosophy sent you. So I had the great fortune to be invited to Yakima, Washington to attend the 2016 Hop Harvest with Hopsteiner last year, which was truly an incredible experience that convinced me to keep a spot open every September for a trip to Yakima. Waiting for me at the airport the morning I arrived to Yakima was Doug Wilson from Hopsteiner. Doug, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So you've been with Hopsteiner for how long?
I joined Hopsteiner in June of 2015, so just a little bit over 2 years.
And Hopsteiner, I was thinking maybe we could start with some background on what Hopsteiner is, how long they've been around. I know they're not a young company.
No, actually, I would classify them as definitely an old company. Hopsteiner was founded in 1845 by the Steiner family, of course, and it is still family owned to this day. I believe they're in their 7th generation.
So cool.
So that makes them 8 years older than Anheuser-Busch, 42 years older than Coca-Cola. They've been around a very, very long time. It started in Germany, in the Hallertau region, the primary growing region over there. And in kind of the mid 1900s, they made their way over to the Pacific Northwest. Matter of fact, our growing operations, we have about 4,000 acres of our own growing operations in the Pacific Northwest in the Yakima Valley. The name of that company within our company is Golden Gate Ranches because their first ranch was actually in California.
Oh, wow.
Believe it or not. Yeah. That they still own that ranch. It's no longer a hop ranch. I think they're growing almonds or something like that down there now. But that's still the namesake of all of our growing operations is the Golden Gate Ranches. Yeah.
That's very cool. And so, I think Yakima Valley is known by brewers, at least, as being kind of a hotbed of hop growing, right?
Absolutely.
And what is it that brought, Hopsteiner being as old as they are, obviously there's got to be something about the climate and the soil and the kind of agronomics potential of that region that brought Hopsteiner out. How did they end up in Yakima Valley?
So, again, getting back into the history a little bit, there were basically two Steiner brothers, and one split off and came to the United States, recognized that there was an opportunity for hop growing in the U.S. And hop growing in the United States has been around since the Pilgrims, basically, and it's migrated from kind of New York to the Midwest, and then eventually settled in the Pacific Northwest. Because, to answer your actual question, it's actually it's the ideal latitude. If you actually draw a line from, say, like Germany, straight across, you're going to run basically right into the Pacific Northwest growing regions.
Right.
And hops are they are photosensitive, meaning the angle of the sun tells the differing angles of the sun throughout the growing season tells them what to do. Tells them to go into the next phase of growing, et cetera, et cetera. So if you need to have that correct latitude to get that correct light. Now, and then you also have with the Yakima Valley, and so Yakima grows about 85% of the hops grown in the Pacific Northwest. The other, maybe 75% in that range. The rest are grown in Oregon and Idaho, but it's all that same kind of latitude.
Yeah.
And why Yakima is so great is it's essentially a desert. It's an arid, very dry desert, and hops don't like a lot of moisture. It breeds powdery mildew, downy mildew, various diseases that they can get. And so that combination of the right latitude and the right soil conditions and growing conditions, dry, arid, and there's 300 days of sun every year, which hops obviously like sun. So it's just kind of that perfect cross section of everything that the hops really like.
That's so cool. And yeah, I lived in Seattle for 13 years, and when you live in Seattle, it's not like you cross the Cascades very often.
Yeah,
at least
right.
I didn't. And so it was really interesting showing up to Yakima last year during that season in particular, and then sitting in the car with Bill and driving along and just seeing these hop fields everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, my word, that seems like everybody is growing hops up there.
Yeah, well, we are at record acreage. Last year we finally surpassed Germany in acreage. Yeah, we were 52,000 and change acres in the Pacific Northwest as a whole.
Damn.
Yeah, and they're adding an additional. I mean, I've heard numbers, another additional 4,000 acres this year. So it's only getting bigger.
Yeah, no complaining from brewers, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, it depends on the brewers you talk to.
Oh, really? Why would there be people complaining about more acreage?
Well, no, acreage is good. It just the last couple of years in the craft industry, having seeing growth slow.
Right.
And to be honest, because of the dynamic of what the hop industry was only 2 or 3 years ago. A lot of these brewers were over contracting in order to guarantee their place in line to get some hops, which is not what we ever recommend doing. But that was kind of the way of the world. And now that growth has slowed, a lot of these brewers are somewhat over contracted. And so over contracted brewers with record acreage means growers are getting a little bit nervous about an oversupplied situation. So
Right.
But that's the hop market. It goes in cycles.
Yeah. Well, let's hope that decline doesn't last too long and we start to see another uptick here.
Yeah, and honestly, it's law of large numbers, right? It's the growth numbers are slowing because the barrelage numbers are so much larger these days, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
And there are still pockets of growth throughout the craft industry that are very exciting. It's just you can't stay at 18% growth a year forever. It just doesn't.
Exactly. I mean, the way I look at it is if we can sustain, even if we can kind of plateau and sustain this kind of like the size that it is, there's some benefit to that as opposed to actual decline. But Hopsteiner does basically everything when it comes to hops, I learned. By that, I mean, you guys are selecting and breeding and doing all of this. How does the whole process get started? How does the next?
Yeah, it is not a short nor is it an easy process. But yeah, just in general, kind of 50,000 foot view, Hopsteiner is completely vertically integrated. So we do everything from our own breeding and R&D up through growing, through processing, and then obviously selling to brewers. So we have our hands in everything. And so the first step obviously is breeding. I mean, we are constantly looking for not only just the next new hot, cool variety. I mean, that's part of it too. But our breeding program is also looking for ways to optimize the varieties we have. We're cleaning up viruses that are in some of these varieties and trying to make the public varieties that everybody grow better on our yards, so that we can get higher yields and recognize the better agronomics of our breeding program.
Right.
So just First thing, our breeding program is unique amongst the breeding programs out there. Typical, conventional breeding programs, you take a couple of varieties that you like and you cross them because I like this variety. We like aspects of this variety. Let's cross them and see what we get. So when you cross two varieties, you get literally thousands of seeds, and each one of those seeds is going to be a potential new variety.
And are all of those seeds are ostensibly they're different, potentially different.
Absolutely, they're completely different. They're a brand new variety. If they were all to make it to market, you'd have 10,000 new varieties. So those seeds then kind of to put it in terms that dummies like me understand. Those seeds are basically the offspring of these two other plants. So they're like children. No two are exactly the same, but they all stem from the same parents. Exactly. Just like your parents, they have sex and they had you, and if you have a brother,
I'm not sure that's how it happened with me, Doug. But
but yeah, it's the same thing, right? Our parents, they reproduce and create a new human being every single time, right? With different genetic material and different mark. It's the same thing with hops, only they do it thousands of seeds at a time. So.
Right.
But our breeding program is a little bit different in that we use a molecular marker system based on mapping of the genome of the hop plant to kind of weight the dice in our favor, is the way I like to say. Because really, when you make a cross, you're really just rolling the dice. Hopefully, we get something good out of this. And we like to think that our molecular marker system allows us to really identify those traits that we've identified that we can mark and use that in our crosses, so that we can get things like agronomic yield, disease resistance. Actually, it allows us to identify sex, because that's a huge thing. We don't have to let a plant grow to full maturity now, which takes a year, obviously, to identify whether it's male or female. We can do a genetic test. Say, oh, bam, we got it right there. That's a male. Let's get that one out of here. We don't want the males. We only want the females. They're the ones that produce the hop cones.
No, that's pretty amazing. So it sounds like the kind of the genetic, the ability, I mean, science has brought us to this point. It's allowing us to kind of, I don't know if this is the proper way to put it, but kind of decrease the amount of time required to produce that next big hop, or even, or not, maybe not the most popular hop, but the most effective or useful hop.
Yep, absolutely. That's part of it. So, so right now, getting back to the whole breeding timeline, it's roughly a 10 to 15 year timeline, depending on the variety.
That's amazing.
So I'll kind of, if it's okay, I'll kind of walk through kind of each stage of that process, because I think it's really cool. It's actually one of my favorite aspects of what we do. So we will take, say, 25 or 50 crosses a year. So we'll do multiple crosses every year, and each one of those crosses is going to produce 1,000, 2,000 seeds. Right. So we over the course of a year, we're going to have 25,000, 30,000 different seeds that are all potential new varieties.
Right.
The absolute first thing we're going to do is expose every single one of them. We're going to put them in little pots, and we're going to expose all of them to disease. And anything that does not show disease resistance is going to be immediately removed from the program.
She gone.
Yeah, she gone. That's gonna cut out the majority of those new varieties. I mean, we're going to get down into maybe there's 5,000 of those pots out of 25, 30,000 that make it beyond the disease resistance test.
Wow, so they're really a vulnerable. It's really a vulnerable plant. It sounds like just overall in general.
It absolutely is. And again, we try to select for those those crosses that have the disease resistance genes that we've identified, but it's still. It's still somewhat of a crapshoot when it comes to that. So
sure.
So that's the first, because we have 4,000 acres, we're growers. Our breeding program is geared towards what is going to be the best agronomic variety for growers, because we want that. If you don't have growers that want to grow your hops, your hops aren't going to be successful. So then that's the first year. And then kind of year 2 to 3 is what we call our single hill evaluation. We will plant the remainders of them in their own plant. One hop plant is called a hill, right? So we will plant all of those. So that way you can actually see how they grow. Do they make it up to the wire? You can start doing, you're continuing to monitor their disease resistance. At this point, you can kind of get some of the chemical traits. So, they actually maybe produce some cones. You can harvest some of the cones and actually identify, okay, what are the alpha acids? What are the beta acids? What are the hop oils? At what point during the harvest window do they mature? Because that's actually a really key, especially when we're at record acreage. That's a really key thing. When do these varieties mature, right? Because the hop harvest is, for all intents and purposes, 6 weeks, right? It's the last week of August through the first week of October, with a little bit here and there on the ends of that. Everything has to be harvested in that 6-week window. If everything matured at the same time, we wouldn't be able to get all the hops harvested.
Right. It's
window, right?
It's almost like you're kind of selecting for staggered maturation, right? So
exactly. So we want early, early, middle, late, and late. We want to have that staggered so that we can pick those hops in that 1 week window where they are absolutely at their prime. They have the right dry matters. They have everything that we want. Because if you let them hang too long, that's when you start getting onion, garlic, and different aroma compounds that you really don't want in those particular varieties. So that stage of the development process, that kind of second and third year, is really where we measure all those types of things. When does this mature? When should we train it, in order to get to that maturity, et cetera, et cetera. And that whole process is going to eliminate, let's say now we have 5,000 experimental plants, right? At that point, we're going to eliminate all but maybe 100 of them.
Wow.
So from year 0 to year, call it 4, we've gone from 25 to 30,000 seeds to 100 plants that at this point even we are still not viable, but they've made those first 2 cuts.
It sounds like a brand new hops odds are even worse than mine was trying to join the basketball team in junior high. When I was competing against like 20 other dudes. Well, and the thing
about the same. I would say it's probably about. I met you, Marshall.
Man, I got mad skills. One of the things that I wonder when it comes to that type of a selection process is when you're harvesting for what you're looking for is a very specific type of thing, particularly disease resistance and all of that. But I have to wonder, like, how many of these kind of unique varieties got tossed that could have been huge? I mean, that's got to be something that's on the minds of hop breeders.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there are a lot of very popular varieties out there that were bred for another reason, that were bred as, high up. So, I mean, the hop market has changed in the last just 10 to 15 years, right?
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
With craft, and the ubiquitousness of IPAs and people wanting different hop flavors and aromas. I mean, that's relatively very, very new in the beer industry. Before kind of craft got us to that point, hops were bred for 2 reasons: alpha and aroma. And aromas were, your Saaz, your Tettnangs, Cascade was an aroma hop, but it wasn't like, what's the new big fruity, weird, wacky, kind of thing. It was just, so there were a lot of varieties that were kind of tossed aside because they were failed alpha varieties. Maybe they only got 8 or 9% alpha, which, 20 years ago, 30 years ago was a high alpha variety, right? And then all of a sudden, craft comes along, and people, there's some growers that have a few of these old failed aroma varieties lying around, and all of a sudden, a craft brewer comes around, rubs it, and goes, "That smells freaking awesome."
Yeah.
Can I have that? And bam, you got a brand new aroma variety.
That's amazing. I think in rightfully so on some levels, I guess, but there's kind of this divide when it comes to craft brewers and home brewers and in their thinking about big beer and how particularly maybe ABI is really trying to get an edge in on craft brewing and whatnot. But when it comes to kind of that issue
Yeah.
and hops. It would seem to me, and tell me if I'm wrong here, that Big Beer is still, utilizing the same farms you guys do to grow the hops that they use, and that's got to be a big part of what keeps.
Yeah, absolutely. What most people probably don't understand is that the big brewers are actually very good partners of ours when it comes to the breeding of new varieties. They're as interested in new varieties as I would say they're more interested in new varieties than even some of the craft guys, because the amount of hops they buy, obviously it's very critical to them.
Right.
But they actually are very good partners for us. For instance, Anheuser-Busch owns Elk Mountain Farms in Idaho, which is their hop growing operation in northern Idaho. They will partner with us, and we will plant some of our later stage experimental varieties in Idaho, so that we can determine how that particular, and this is kind of later in kind of years 6, 7, 8 of a new variety development, to determine, okay, we've determined it grows well in Yakima. Now let's see if it grows well in Oregon and Idaho. And Anheuser-Busch will partner with us and allow us to grow some of those varieties with them up at their Elk Mountain Farms, and they are also doing brewing trials on their laboratory scale, which is absolutely state of the art.
Yeah, I bet.
Which gives us a lot of great feedback on those varieties, not only for what they're doing, for what ABI wants to use them for, but just for us in general. So they are actually a very good partner with our breeding program and what we're trying to do with new varieties. And
I bring that up not as a show of support for Big Beer or anything like that. I just think it's really easy to get stuck in that rut for us homebrewers of, it's trendy and hip and cool to hate the big guy because and they do some really shitty things. I mean, there's no denying that,
Sure.
particularly when it comes to distribution. But at the same time, the craft industry arguably wouldn't exist if it weren't for the money that gets pumped into beer overall from Big Beer. And a lot of the popular proprietary varieties of hops that are out there now would not exist without the big brewers. Yeah, and not to say like high five Big Beer, thanks a lot, but I do think it's an interesting perspective. And I'll admit, coming up to Yakima last year, it certainly shifted my thinking on the impact that Big Beer has on craft beer, and that it's not all evil, though parts of it might be. But so when we come back, we got to take a quick break here. But when we come back, maybe what we'll do is move back into the growing aspects of hops, how they get processed, and how you get them out to brewers.
Absolutely, sounds good.
All right, stick with us. If, like me, you prefer the simpler side of brewing beer, you have got to check out the Brew Bag, a food-safe fabric filter that allows for mashing of the finest crushed grain without risking the dreaded stuck sparge. I've been recommending these things since I started using them. They are awesome. The Brew Bag offers the only completely reinforced fabric filter for brewing that can be used over 100 times and comes in sizes that fit most mash tuns, or you can even have one custom made. Go check the Brew Bag out at brewinabag.com and be sure to use promo code TBP17 to get 10% off your order of $30 or more. So Doug, it sounds like we maybe left a little bit off of the what it takes to breed these hops, and once you finish with that, maybe we can move into growing and harvesting hops.
Absolutely. So I think where we left off was kind of that year 2, 3, where we've got single plants, and we're looking at continuing to monitor their disease resistance, their maturity windows. We're still taking kind of the chemical traits, we're looking at their alpha acids, beta acids, hop oils, and making sure that they're where they're staying in that, because a variety can change from a baby hop, which is a first year hop, to its mature hop, the next year and year 3. So we're always constantly monitoring that. So we go from those 5,000 plants, and then now to the next phase, which is we'll take a 20 to 100 of those varieties and put them in what we call the multi-hill evaluation stage, where we put 7 plants on either side of a row together, and that allows us to see how they grow, the kind of the canopy they form. We can get their agronomic traits now. Now we know how they yield. We're still looking at disease resistance. We're still looking at their chemical traits. And But now we have enough where we can actually start getting them into the hands of some of our favorite brewers and doing some brewing trials on a very small pilot level.
There was a point last year, and maybe this comes earlier, and I just forgot to ask it. Where I think is it Dr. Paul Matthews? Yeah. So where he was explaining to me that there was this area where baby plants were being grown and they had to be separated, far away from some other plant. And is that the male female thing? I might have been making that up. So.
It's either going to be there's two things. It's either keep them away from any sort of disease because they're like I said, a lot of these we're pumping disease onto these things to see if they're going to.
Oh, I see.
Or it's a cross, right, where they put them in bags, and because in order to make a cross, what you have to do is you have to plant a male next to a female. And let them go up the wire, and then you got to bag them. You got to put bags around them because the male is going to create pollen that if you don't bag it up and keep it from getting out, it'll pollinate the entire female yard. And what it means then is that when you try to harvest those hops, they're full of seeds, and brewers don't want that, right?
Gotcha.
So those would be my two guesses. But to be honest, Paul Matthews is a genius, and 9 times out of 10, I have no idea what he's talking about. So that multi-hill evaluation kind of allows us to do the first quote unquote commercial testing of, all right, what are these hops really, what would they really look like in a commercial yard? And let's get them into some brewers' hands to start getting, because at this point, we're in year 7 now, right? Of a variety development. We've had no input from brewers. It's all on the growing side. But we can have the best growing hop in the world, but if brewers don't want it, it's nothing. It's crap, right? So at years kind of 7 through 10, what we'll do is we'll take, of those 20 to 100 varieties, maybe 1 or 2 now we've identified meet all of the criteria. And so we'll put them into a 5-acre plot. And 5 acres is enough to allow us to pick them with our own combines, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. We harvest with combines, which is different than anybody else.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Allows us to see how the variety truly reacts as a commercial variety. And now we have enough. We can get, for instance, this year, we have a couple of experimental varieties that we've been showcasing, 06297 and 09326, that we've gotten in the hands of brewers across the country, and they've all made some experimental beers from those varieties. And that's kind of the last stop. That 5-acre plot's the last stop. And that can be a 3-year stop. That can be a 10-year stop, depending on the variety.
Wow.
Now at that point, it kind of depends on demand that we're getting from brewers and reconfirming all of the agronomics, all of the chemical traits, all the disease resistance, everything we've done for 10 years, we're still reconfirming, making sure that variety does not change once it gets into that full commercial production. So,
right.
So as you can imagine, that's a very long, involved, and expensive prospect for getting a new and we do it every year.
We're now getting into the growing phase. It's kind of proven itself. It almost, it's so obvious just how incredibly front heavy. Like the time it takes to get a hop ready for beer is way longer than I think. I know for me than what a lot of people might think, that you're starting the popular hop of today was actually developed 10 years ago. At least.
Yeah, if you have a variety that you're brewing with that has a really cool, unique name that came out in the last couple of years, there are scores of people and at least a decade to 15 years of work that have gone into both on the public and the private side, right? So we have a private breeding program, right? But the USDA still has its own public breeding program, and they're doing the same thing. Now, they don't have the genetic markers and molecular marker system that we use, but they're still doing the traditional crosses, and they're still going through this same process of trying to find new public varieties, which I think is as critical as what we're doing on the private side.
Absolutely. So you've got this hop that's working out now, and you've got some professional brewers out there who have thrown it into some beers, and it's coming out really good. What then? Yeah.
So now at that point, all right, we decide let's name it and let's take it fully commercial. So last year was Denali. That was our we took Denali was 06277 as an experimental number, and it's a beast of a hop, and we had enough demand from brewers that, okay, we're confident enough to make this a full commercially available hop. We're going to grow this as a real farm hop. And so we went and planted out several yards of Denali. And at that point, we knew what we were going to get from Denali. And so we put on the several acres, and at that point, you're basically, you're putting it in there and you're just kind of watching it, and harvesting becomes the critical element at this point, right? So there are there's several different methods, but really two primary methods that we look at for harvesting a hop. The traditional method is you drive through the hop yard, you cut the bottom off, the bottom of the vine, so that it hangs vertical, and then you drive through and you cut the top off. You throw that whole big vine in the back of a truck, drive it to a picking facility, rehang the vine up, and it gets picked and cleaned and everything else. Where
real quick clarification, you hear some people call it a hop vine versus a hop bine. It's a vine. Can you explain the difference between the two?
No.
Okay. Well, grapes grow on vines, and hops grow on vines. We'll just leave it at that.
That's as probably as in depth as to it as we need to get. Yeah. It's a vine. It took me a while too, because you always want to say vine, right? But no, it's a hop vine.
So you get them into the processing facility, and that's one way to do it. That's
the traditional way to do it, and that's the way it's been done for hundreds of years. And it works. It takes a lot of labor. So what Hopsteiner has done, and I believe we're really one of the only ones that do it this way, is we actually use combines. So instead of cutting the vines down and putting them in the back of a truck, what we do is we run through the yard with basically a mobile picking unit that strips only the hops and some of the leaves and stems and some of the smaller arms, and strips all that off of the vine, and then chops up the vine and puts it in the ground as we're going through the harvesting period. So what that does is we can get 5 times the amount of hops in the back of one of our trucks versus the traditional method of throwing the whole vine in the truck and then rehanging it. And we can do it with a third of the labor, roughly. So we're saving on labor costs. We're saving on truck, number of trucks, fuel, and
it's an incredible process. Yeah, I was there, and I got to see these huge combines. Are these the ones where there's that dude standing up top with a machete? Yep. And he's, oh my God, yeah. And just the way these things shave the vine. I mean, that's it kind of sucks them in, shaves them off, and
you pretty much got 2 to 3 dudes out in the yard, and they're monitoring the machine, making sure it's doing its job, and they're cutting things up, and it is hyper efficient because think about it, right? Because we talked about the picking windows, right? Maturity windows when hops are picked. We have record acreage of hops that need to be harvested in the same amount of time as it's always taken, right? So the critical machine, the machine that always needs to be working, is the combine. It always has to be picking in order to get through that, right? So the efficiencies you have to build in on the front side and the back side are critical. Right. So if you're cutting down vines and hanging them up in a facility, you're going to have to spend a lot of money to build new facilities to do that. Whereas if you're doing it the way we're doing it, we have the efficiencies in the field. We're getting 5 times the amount of hops, and we're working on gondola systems, which basically take those trucks and allow them to dump into a semi truck, which can take 5 or 6 different loads. So now we're talking 30 times the amount of hops going to a cleaning facility versus the traditional method. So it's all about getting those commercial efficiencies into the system so that we can guarantee that we will get all of those hops harvested in the correct window without fail. I mean, that's what it's all about. And that's where all of our money is being invested these days. And it's awesome to see.
It's amazing. It's truly like wow, mind-blowing, kind of eye-opening thing for sure.
So so once you pick you pick the hops, right? And when you bring them to a clean, I'm calling a cleaning facility, right? So our facility or our combines will harvest the hop cones. And like I said, there's some leaves, there's some stems, there's some small arms, but for the most part, it's a lot of it's hops. You got to bring them to a cleaning facility that essentially sorts the hop cones away from everything else. And so that's kind of the next step. And that takes about a half an hour really to run the hops through that and bring the hop. So from the field, you've picked them in the field. It's a half an hour drive to the cleaning facility, half an hour of cleaning. Now you've loaded, and now you load those basically pure hop cones into a kiln bed, right? Because hops are still, at this point, 77% water.
Yeah.
They're still very moist, and they will go bad immediately. So when we do fresh hop beers for brewers in the Pacific Northwest and California, we will ship hops overnight in refrigerated trucks to the breweries, so that within 12 to 24 hours of those hops being picked, they're in a kettle, or they're getting brewed with, because beyond that they start to go bad pretty quick.
They start to compost pretty quickly, I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
This was another one of my kind of favorite parts of the process, observing the process, was you've got all of these huge, fluffy, like a fresh flower, these moist, really fluffy cones. And those at the end of this, what you're calling the cleaning process, I mean, they are just these fresh, big, fluffy cones. That sounded,
yeah,
but those get transported, moved very closely to these crazy rotating heating bed things.
Well, the kilning process is different. Again, it's just as different as the harvesting period. But so our kiln beds, if you can picture them, are basically, I would say, almost as long as a football field, and about, I would say, a half as wide, right? And so we run our combines until those kiln beds are full of those hops, right? I mean, that's one of the coolest things that you see when you're in Yakima, is walking through and seeing these beds of just beautiful, fluffy hops that smell amazing.
It smells so good in that room, yes.
But at this point, we have got to get them down from that 77% moisture level to 8 to 10% moisture. We need to dry them out, because otherwise they're going to go bad immediately. And that's where the kilning process starts. And it's a process of air movement, heated air movement, just drying those. And if you walk into a kiln bed in the middle of the kilning process, it smells awesome, but you can just see these beautiful, it's the steam coming off of these hops.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But that's a critical element of getting these hops from harvest to a point where we can store them for the brewers, is getting them kilned and dried out. Because when you get them to that 8 to 10%, their shelf stability is exponentially higher. And that's what we do. So we get them kilned to that 8 to 10%, and then we'll bring them into a conditioning room. Basically, it brings them it dumps them onto different beds where we can control, moisture levels. Because if you think about a kiln bed, right, let's say it's 3 feet deep. The bottom is going to be a lot drier than the top, and the middle is going to be somewhere in between, right? You need to homogenize that. So when you dump them into a conditioning room and let them sit for about 8 hours, that moisture level will homogenize throughout that particular lot. It'll move from the driest, or from the moister to the drier hops, and it'll all average out. And then from that point, you bring it to a baler, which a bale is typically about 200 pounds. So if you ever hear a hop guy talking about bales per acre, think about 200 pounds is one bale.
Huh, cool.
And we'll dump it. And a baler is basically a big hydraulic press. It takes 100 pounds of hops, compresses it, takes another 100 pounds of hops, compresses it, bam, you got a bale. It's about, 4 feet long by 2 feet square, and that's the traditional, in the US anyway, that's the traditional storage method of whole cone dried hops.
Right.
And then that will go into our storage facilities, which are kept at 25 to 27 degrees. So from harvest until being put into a cold storage facility, those hops it's about 24 hours.
And for our international listeners, 25 to 27 degrees Fahrenheit is below 0 degrees Celsius. These warehouses are freezing cold.
Yeah, and they're massive.
They're huge.
Which in the Yakima Valley, where it can be, it's 100 degrees right now. It's been 100 degrees for the last week. They're not cheap.
Yeah, I can imagine. God, I live in Fresno, and my AC's not cheap.
So that's kind of the harvest, the life of the harvest. It's and that happens every day, from the last week of August to the first week of October. It's really, really awesome to see how this industry.
It's cool. When we actually started. I remember when you picked me up from the airport. We started the tour at one of these cold storage facilities, and it was just. I mean, it was relatively early. I think it was about 11:30, maybe noon, and it was just people driving forklifts around everywhere, constant movement. Bales getting placed over here, and how cool for a home brewer to see a 200-pound bale of a fantastic hop just sitting right there in front of you, and in piles as high as the freaking ceiling,
and the smell is just amazing.
I mean, I felt like the entire city of Yakima smelled like when I open a fresh bag of hops.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's the cool thing is when you go to Yakima, say in October, November, when all of the pellet plants and downstream processing plants are running, the whole town just smells like a dry hop. It's awesome.
Well, speaking of pelletizing, that was another one of the really interesting aspects of my tour with you guys. What is it? So you've got these bales that are basically just compressed, dried whole cone hops. From there, what happens?
Once we get the whole harvest in, I would say 90% of what we sell is actually in pelletized form. So you take let's say a hypothetical one bale. That bale needs to be. Well, the first thing we do is we put it on a conveyor, and there will be literal human beings that will break it open to make sure that there's no foreign matter in there. And they have found some really funky stuff in bales, not necessarily from our farms, but we buy from other farms as well. Our growing operations cover about a third of what we sell, and the other 2/3 we buy from other hop growers. The funny story of our pellet plant manager is he has a $600 wrench that he found in the middle of a bale.
Wow. I mean, I've heard stories. When I was over in New Zealand, we went out to Motueka and visited the New Zealand hop farmers there. And yeah, they've got the same stories, man. These bales with birds in them and just all kinds of weird stuff that can end up in the middle of a bale.
Yep. So yeah, that's, they'll break them open with, these just long, stakes basically, just to make sure there's no large foreign matter. And then they'll go through a hammer mill, and the hammer mill, as it sounds, will pulverize them into essentially a powder. And, that powder gets run through, magnets and different, sieving mechanisms to make sure that there's no foreign matter in them. And then it goes into a big surge bin that really mixes up, because we'll do 25 bales. So 10,000 pounds is one, pellet lot run. But then there are also brewers that have, 50,000, 100,000 pounds of hops that want us to run it into a single uniform pellet lot. But we do it 10,000 pounds at a time. So,
wow.
10,000 pounds goes in to the surge bin. It mixes and I mean, you can imagine it's a kind of a moist powder that's rolling through, and then that runs through a pellet die. And we manage, several different dyes. We don't talk about the numbers or the metallurgy of them because it's all very proprietary that we've done a lot of research and spent a lot of money into. But each variety, you'd imagine every variety is going to run a little bit differently through a different pellet die, right? Because you're not going to run Cascade the same way you're going to run Zeus. It's just that's not the way it works.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a curious thing. I think, I don't know, maybe I'm speaking too broadly here, but I think homebrewers in general just kind of presume that there's this, this dye that you run hops through, and that's why they all come out looking sort of the same. But that's not the case.
That's not the case at all. Absolutely. And that's why we have dozens of different pellet dyes. And, through our expertise over the last several decades, we understand that, okay, a Cascade's going to run better through this dye than, and a Zeus is going to run better through this dye. But the other thing you have to manage is, I mean, these things are agricultural products. They're going to be different from year to year. Yeah. So the Cascade dye from last year may not be the same dye that you use this year. And it's just a matter of knowing what we're doing as far on the pelletizing side and making those adjustments as we go through a crop year.
Right.
So what you do is you take that powder product, and it's going to be pushed through these dyes. And it comes out kind of like warm cookie dough, right? Like it's pushing these dyes. And we try to we manage the temperature of the hops, the pellets, as they come through that dye, right? Because think about it, you're compressing this powder through a very small hole, it's going to pick up heat. You want to minimize the amount of heat because that's only going to do oxidation and degradation of those hops. So that's what I talk about when I'm talking about different varieties through different dyes. We're managing that through metallurgy, through pressure, through time, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And so as they come through those dyes, knives come around the outside of the die and cut those pellets into those kind of, 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch pellets that most home brewers are known for. But at that point, they're still, like I said, they're like warm cookie dough. They're still warm. They need to be cooled off. And so now we take these 10,000 pound pellet lots and they go into these different kind of weighting bins that are all lined up on a conveyor line. So now, as I talked about, some of these craft brewers, they have 100,000 pound lots. Well, we have multiple 10,000 pound lots of the same variety sitting on this conveyor line. So as we feed those pellets into that conveyor, we can feed from all of those or some of those to make sure that is a homogenized pellet lot going into the craft customers' boxes as we package them. So you can take 100. That's the way we take 100,000 pounds and make it 100,000 pounds of the same alpha oil, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. So you've got this bale that might have cones from, it will have cones from multiple different plants. You're bringing them all together and saying that's how you can basically slap on a AA percentage and say that this is consistent
right.
on
Yeah.
this batch.
So when we do selection with a craft customer, we all get in a room, we put different lots in front of them. And depending on the size of the customer, they might pick one lot. They might pick 4 lots, depending on their size. But if they pick 4 lots of hops, okay, those are going to be our centennials right now. Okay, we want this year, we love these. We want these 4 lots blended into one centennial lot.
Right.
We will take that information and based on their contracts with us, we will process all of those into one uniform centennial pellet so that when they get their boxes, they all have the same alpha acids, the same oil, compositions. So they know that they're getting from day 1 to day 365 of that crop year. They know they're getting the exact same thing.
That is so rad. And I remember, Bill telling me how that's, they'll come in and they'll say, I want, 30% centennial from this lot and, 60%. And you guys take it and blend it together and you produce this sort of, in many ways, it's kind of their personal centennial version of centennial based on their selection.
Not in many ways, in that exact way. That's exactly what our customers do is they will come out and they will select their XYZ brewery lot. That's my centennial. That's my Cascade. That's what I want.
That's so rad. So after they get pelletized, they're kind of warm like this. They get somewhat cooled off, and then you guys pump them into these huge 44-pound bags.
Yep. Yeah. So in those storage bins that we use to kind of homogenize them, that's where they get cooled down to their basically we want to get them as cooled down as quickly as possible from that point. We trialed some nitrogen stuff, but that didn't really work. So it's really just air cooling.
Yeah.
We get them cooled down, packaged into 44-pound cartons, and then put on pallets, and then they're immediately put back into that 25 to 27 degree cold storage.
Yeah, and then it's time to get those out to brewers, right? I mean, that's the next step. And how? So maybe go through the processes real quick about how, if there's any nano brewers or craft brewers who are listening to the show, how they can get hops from you guys, and then if there's anything home brewers can do as well.
Absolutely, we're size agnostic. That's the way I like to say it. We will sell to anybody that wants to buy hops. Our philosophy is, so our smallest contract is 220 pounds with brewers, right? So if you want to have a contract with us, it's 220 pounds. But we also sell on spot as low as 5 pounds at a time. So I went to the National Homebrew Conference, saw you there, Marshall. Let's talk to a lot of home brewers. And currently, like I said, our smallest unit of sales is 5 pounds. So if you're part of a homebrew group, order 5 pounds, you can divide them up amongst yourselves, do some brewery. We're in the process of maybe rethinking that and seeing, what we can do on a smaller scale. But right now it's really in the kind of the discovery phases of that.
Well, I think 5 pounds is about what these New England IPA brewers are using in their IPAs. So,
5 pounds.
5 pounds.
Right,
yeah.
So buy 5 pounds and put
Make
it into
a beer.
20 gallon batch, you're good to go.
Yeah. Well, and you know, if you're not able to buy direct from Hopsteiner, all of your guys' popular hops are available at places like Yakima Valley Hops and
Absolutely. And definitely go to the Yakima Valley Hops guys. They're fantastic. They're great partners of ours, and they carry all of our varieties. Yeah.
So is there anything new that you got, any new hop varieties or anything like downstream products you were talking about that you can kind of speak to a little bit? Because I know there's more than just hops, that are coming out of Hopsteiner. And I don't know if there's anything you can, like any new hop varieties maybe you want to kind of.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about Denali, which is our most recent commercial variety. And, Denali means the big one. And that is the best descriptor of this hop. It grows like a freaking champ. It's huge yielder. It is the highest commercially available oil content we say between 4 to 6%. I know 2016, the crop average is about 5.5%. And I think last year was about 5%. Huge, big oil. So big flavor contribution when used in late kettle and dry hopping. Its chief characteristics are pineapple, juicy fruit, gum, a little bit of resinousness on the, just kind of general hoppiness when used on the dry hop side.
Yeah.
It has really taken off for us. It's one of
I absolutely love that variety.
Yeah. Lemon drop, that's been around for 3 or 4 years, and it's been really hard to come by because there are several large craft breweries that have used a lot of it. But we've planted more acres, and as the name sounds, it's huge lemon. It's actually a daughter of Cascade, so it's got some Cascade similarities. But if you took Cascade and added kind of lemon pledge to it, and the great thing about lemon drop is it does well in subtle applications like lagers and wit beers, but it can also hold its own as a lemon drop IPA hop. It's a really fantastic hop. So those are our two most popular. We have Eureka and Calypso, which are a couple of our other new varieties. Eureka's big and dank and just, if you're into dank hops, Eureka's great. It's got dark fruit flavors. And Calypso is big. Despite the name, it's got some tropical fruit to it, but I get a lot of apple, pear, mint type of character, and it really does a great job of adding a different layer of flavor and aroma in a dry hop. It's great hop.
I've used Calypso. One of my favorite applications for Calypso was in an ESB that I made a couple years ago. And man, I'm telling you, it wasn't, I don't want to say tea because I'm not a big fan of that tea flavor in beer, but the fruitiness combined with kind of this nice minty earthy thing was just fantastic. Probably one of the best ESBs I've made.
ESB sounds like an amazing application actually for that, because it just has this different, kind of weird, wild, different, but it can also play well in a traditional style like that. That's actually a great. I might try to do that. I'll have to get your recipe.
Yeah, it's probably nothing special, but on
the extract and downstream, that's really where we're seeing a lot of attention these days from the craft brewers. Is they all want to find new ways to get hops into their beers without using hops in their beers, if that makes sense. They're looking for different ways. And a lot of different breweries are using extracts, which I think this could actually probably be a whole new show talking about extracts, how it's done, and then the different applications. But
yeah, I'd love that.
Basically, extracts solve several problems for craft brewers. These craft, like you said, 5 pounds per barrel in a New England IPA. That leads to a lot of beer losses for these craft breweries. So they're trying to find ways to get hop flavors and aromas into their beers while minimizing those losses. And extracts and downstream products will do that.
Yeah, I don't want to spend, I like the idea of making the downstream products its own show, because there's when we went up into that lab or that area and just the chemistry, the chemical separation of the stuff that can come from hops was amazing. I mean, there had to be 6 or 7 different products sitting in front of me that, we're all sitting there and smelling these things. And then it's revealed that this all came from the same lot. I mean, this was, and it's just different, compounds and different things that we chemically separated out, ranging from oily looking stuff to like it looked like a lip gloss, like that the consistency of like chapstick. Just fantastic stuff, and it all smells different and amazing, and different types of acids. I think you guys did like a pure beta acid. That you showed us. It was really interesting. Yeah, I'd love to have you on to talk more about that stuff later on.
I think we should plan on doing that because we have, I mean, it's 40 some odd products that are all created from essentially the alpha acids, beta acids, and hop oils of hops.
Crazy science,
and
people.
Actually some of the vegetative matter too. So it's something that, for the purposes of this show, not only are small craft brewers and large craft brewers, but home brewers are starting to ask about this stuff. And I think I know
home brewers are absolutely focused on, again, like the home brewers who are making IPA, particularly the New England, these hazy New England style IPAs, they're looking to get as little vegetative matter in that beer as possible. And I know plenty who are using, hop extracts for bittering, what little bittering they're doing in these beers. And I've had a few and they're coming out wonderful.
Yeah, no, it's kind of the way I see this industry going. Is we're going to see a lot more. And to be honest, the hilarious part is 10 years ago, stuff like that was a 4-letter word, man. If you didn't use just water, malt, hops, yeast, man, you weren't a craft brewer. You were a big brewer doing, tricks. But now it's like, no, that's anything is possible because we need to find different ways to not only make great beers, but make great beers and make money, because this isn't a hobby anymore for a lot of these guys, It's,
exactly. Man.
They need to be able to do it efficiently, and that's what these products allow.
Well, hey, let's spend a little bit of time real quick, just as we finish up here, talking about what Hop Harvest is. Maybe you could tell us if somebody wants to go, can they? Who's usually there? What types of things are going on during the like you said, late August through early October Hop Harvest up in Yakima, Washington?
Yeah, so we're a little bit different from most of our competitors in that if you have a contract with us, a hop contract with us, and you are in Yakima, we will allow you to do selection, regardless of the size of that contract. Our minimum contract size is 220 pounds per variety. So if you have a 220-pound Cascade contract with us and you're in Yakima, we will put you in a room with several lots of Cascade, and you can pick your lot of Cascades. So that whole process of going through, the pelletizing process, we will make sure that lot that you selected is the only lot that we pull your Cascades from, so that I'm getting my Cascades every year. And we do that for, I think last year, I'm trying to remember the number. I know it was over 550 brewers came through for hop selection, basically in the month of September, representing 125, 130 different breweries. Some breweries come multiple times because, let's take like a Bell's, for instance. They're going to come early. They're going to do their early varieties, the early maturing varieties, like a Centennial that's matured in early September. They're going to do their selection then, and they're going to come later in the season and do their selection for different, the later maturing varieties, so that they make sure they find all their best hops at different times of the year.
Right. Whereas
some breweries can only afford to come once, and they'll come, the second or third week. They'll do all their Cascades and all their early stuff as well as some of the later stuff. And that's what we do. So we put them in a room. We always keep all of our brewers separate unless there are breweries that request to be together, and that happens.
That's sweet.
Yeah. We'll put them in a separate room. They get their own room. They get, we'll put the multiple lots in front of them. They get to, rub the different varieties and smell them. And then they pick based on their contracts, either 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 lots that they want their pellets to be made from, or just their hop cones. And then we typically take them on tours. We'll show them to the pellet plant tour, basically all the stuff we've talked about. The extract plant tour. We'll take them to our ranches. That's where they get to go out and they see what we do. They get to rub the hops in the field. We take them to our experimental yards. I mean, again, getting back to that breeding program, we need feedback from brewers. So when they walk through these yards and they smell, those single hill plots, where there's one new variety every single plant, we want them to rub that and say, that's freaking awesome. Let's take that to the next level. And We need all of that sort of feedback. So it's not only is it a way for brewers to get the highest quality product from us and what they want, it's also a way for them to give feedback to us on our breeding program and what we're doing. So it's absolutely critical to what we do. And anybody, like I said, anybody that has a contract with us is able to come out and do that sort of selection process.
That's so cool. That's so cool. And for homebrewers who want to head out there, it's one of those things you may not be able to go out and do selection. You don't really need to do selection, but to be able to just hang out and rub elbows with a bunch of the professional breweries that are hanging out and going down to the sports center, right? And it's not, there's like I said, I'll be up there with Yakima Valley Hops and be hanging out at their shop most of the days and going around and doing some other stuff. If you're around, man, hit me up because it's going to be a lot of fun. I know that we're going to hook up with Hopsteiner one of the days and go out and do some stuff with you guys. So
yeah, and we do a hop tour every year, which is kind of a 2-day Hops 101 where we walk through the R&D process all the way through processing and packaging. And that's open to really anybody. If there's even homebrewers, if there's a homebrew club that wants to send a few guys out, kind of like Top Gun for hops, like send a couple guys out to learn soup to nuts what's going on.
There you
go. That's definitely something that's open to homebrewers.
Well, awesome. Well, Doug, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. I appreciate everything Hopsteiner is doing for the brewing industry, and I look forward to seeing you guys soon.
Likewise, Marshall. Thanks a lot. Let's do it again.
All right, brother.
Cheers.
We'll talk to you soon. Yeah, cheers.
All right, cheers.
All right. If you want to learn more about what Hopsteiner is up to, you can head over to their website, hopsteiner.com, to learn everything that they're doing to help you take hops from bine to glass. Now, speaking of bines, I did look up the difference between a bine and a vine, and here's what the ever-wise Wikipedia has to say. A bine is a climbing plant that climbs by its shoots growing in a helix around a support, in contrast to vines, which climb using tendrils or suckers. So there you have it. If you like what we're doing here and you want more of it, head over to brewlosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can help us out. And don't forget to check out the rewards you can get for supporting us at patreon.com/brewlosophy. If you have any questions you want answered on a future Brew and A episode, you can email them to marshall@brewlosophy.com, or you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter and ask us there as well. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back soon with the next episode of the Brewlosophy Podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey cause it soothes my throat. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman no more.